Hi, this is Mark Orr with the Mission Critical Podcast. This is part of a series of 25 podcasts that are focused around a tool we're developing called Assembly. Assembly is a system or a platform that will bring leaders and projects and resources together and create a far more efficient operational space for global mission and for the ways that we want to engage in our communities and our neighborhoods around the world. There's 5 sections in these 25, and the first one is about crisis. It's about the world in crisis. And the reason we start with that is because if we're going to move ahead, we need to understand what's holding us back at the moment. And we need to do that in a way that looks underneath the skin, not just the surface issues, but what's really happening that is holding us back. Now, this list of 5 items is in no way exhaustive. There's many, many ways that we could look at this. But these 5 represent enough that can sort of jolt us out of our comfort zone and can give us a bit of a framework to start to understand our own communities, our own organizations, our churches, our families even, and see what it is that we can address. You might relate to some of these, and the point is that we look at this not in a depressing way, but in a way that helps us start to say, hey, here's the problem, and now that we can define what the problem is, we can start to look forward to solutions. The next few episodes after this first section of 5 will start to go into some of those solutions and help us realize that, hey, with some work, with some thinking, we do have the resources, the technology, and the ideas to come together as a global community to create a radical change in the world. So the last episode that we did, the first one in this series, was the problem of hope. And just as a very quick review, when we don't have hope, we lose the ability to even believe that things can change, and so we don't even try. Without hope, we end up in despair or even worse. The lack of hope sets the stage for another crisis, the lack of creativity and ideas, and that's what we're going to talk about today. The lack of hope shrinks the ability of our minds to consider solutions. We fool ourselves into believing that there is no solution to the challenges around us or in our lives. So we don't even try. We just stop thinking and we coast along. Some people despise ideas. And I've heard it quite often in my life. Oh, that's just an idea. Oh, here's another idea. She's dreaming, or it's just a fantasy. Nothing's going to happen. But I believe the whole concept, the whole realm of ideas is something that God has created us to have. I believe that God himself in the creative process went through an idea process. He thought through what he wanted his creation to be and to look like. And he created us as creative people. I believe ideas and creativity are building blocks in God's workshop, if we can call it that, where he brings his will and passion together with our talents to develop solutions for living out his love for this world. The way we do that is not just a set plan. The way we do that comes out of the things that combine in so many different variations to form how we, in our own individuality, in diversity, and in the beauty of the creative process, forms the way that we engage with our communities. We've become, to be honest, quite boring. We've lost our ability to create. Hope activates a creative mental process that enables us to think. And that's why we started with hope as one of the crises that we face. But let's assume that we've passed that hope crisis and we move on to ideas. My wife has started a program and an organization called the Stoplight Approach. And in the Stoplight Approach, they use a color-coded system to identify the kind of sort of mental and emotional state that a person is in. And it's useful for children and adults alike. And it uses the red, yellow, green of a stoplight or a traffic signal. People who are in red are using a certain part of their brain. People who are in green are using a different part of their brain. And so it's based on brain science. When you're in red, you're stuck to sort of a predefined built-in pattern of response. And you've heard this before, the fight, flight, or freeze approach. There's not a lot of creativity. You just act because you're acting out of that part of your brain and that kind of emotion. You don't think, you just act. We tend to be hardwired to do it this way. When in red, there's no creativity. And that's a problem. Without hope puts us in a kind of red where we simply cannot use that creative part of our brain. So you see how important it is for us to regain the hope so that we can go into that creative process. Hope puts us back into grain and enables us to think creatively. Ideas are the seeds behind vision. Vision is the maturing of those ideas that leads to plans. Without ideas based on hope, we have no vision and no plans and no action. We accept the status quo and we throw up our hands in defeat. And sadly, all over the world, in millions of neighborhoods, in every nation of the world, we have Christian communities that have thrown up their hands in defeat and have stopped the hard work of thinking in the beautiful way that God wants us to. That's the problem of ideas. With no hope, we often go back to old ideas because we don't have the capacity to think of new ideas. So we go back to the old ideas that were developed not with the current reality in mind, but they're developed in former times when there was hope. But those ideas were for another time and are often not the best ideas needed to create breakthroughs in today's world. Each generation needs its own faith, hope, love, and creativity to face the needs of its day. When we dare to believe, to surrender to reckless faith, the ideas will start to flow. Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see." Isn't that an amazing thing? The power of hope driven by faith combined with creativity? Just imagine the potential. We need to get back to where our communities of faith, our churches, are full of hope and are driven by faith and combined with reality to face everything that doesn't match up to God's beautiful design for our communities. Our creative energy comes from God and His endless resources, and it's shaped by His abundant love for the world. Our field of vision becomes grand all over again and all-encompassing. We see with a clear vision. We see the roots of issues, and we're not afraid to go to the source of the problems. Why? Because we know going there won't discourage us as before. We're willing to go down into that depth to truly understand it. Rather, it'll give us wisdom and insights about the best solutions. But even understanding all of that, the crisis still persists. Author student Susan Scott says this: "There's nothing so dangerous as an idea when it's the only one." She's talking about groupthink, when one idea is accepted without debate or comparison to other ideas, and people simply jump on the first idea that comes about. This is incredibly dangerous because it's assumed the first idea is the best idea, when perhaps it's a mediocre idea or even the worst idea. God gave us the ability to think in diversity, to listen to each other, to generate ideas, to debate them, and to be able to select the best ones based on His values and principles. Other innovators in other fields and industries decry the problem of recycling ideas. In the age of the internet, it's really easy to search for someone, to search for a solution somewhere, by someone, coming up with something in a different context that it was never intended for. To take that problem that was developed in another time and apply it to a problem today. The problem with that approach is that although the problem that you're looking at that you found on the internet looks similar on the surface to the one you're trying to address, often the roots and the context are very different. You can't simply recycle ideas and short circuit the whole process of being creative. The process of thinking and the process of creativity is very important. A good example of this, which I've experienced all over the world, is worship music in churches. I travel to nations on a number of continents with radically different cultures and languages, and yet I hear the same trending worship songs sung everywhere. To me, this is a sad effect of groupthink. People wanting to be like the rest, whether it's laziness or wanting to be like everyone else or a lack of writing talent, I don't know. But I do know that it harmfully eliminates the beautiful diversity that God has given to every nation and people. God created us to create. Lack of ideas and hopeful creativity fuels what I call the grand resignation, when we collectively, in our communities and in our nations and even in our families, say, I see no way out of this. It leads to a hopeless busyness. We don't want to face the bad news or the defeat, so we sort of keep busy at it, doing things that appear to show that we care, but not really a belief that what we're doing will lead to long-term sustainable solutions. It's the Band-Aid on the problem approach. We're riding an exercise bike that goes nowhere. I believe we're stuck in this busyness mode on a global scale. We're unwilling to face the true, deep issues behind our challenges because we have no faith that there's a way out of them. It's a global and local and personal version of the ostrich with its head in the sand. As I hope you know, this podcast is not about encouraging despair or making people feel sad, but it's about defining some of the strongholds and the false narratives that control our lives and limit our action. This is the groundwork that we need to do as a movement of hope. We need to wrestle with reality, and that reality, as we come to grips with it, with backed up by faith, will lead to a groundswell of ideas and innovation. God's creativity in creation is astounding, and not only in creation out there, but in His plans for each one of us. Psalm 40 verse 5 says, "Many, Lord, my God, are the wonders you have done and the things you have planned for us. Nothing can compare with you. Were I to speak and tell of your deeds, they would be too many to declare." There are solutions for all challenges in the world. Let's together dare to believe that God wants to and will rekindle hope in each of us, leading to an awakening of our creativity and ideas for changing our world. Follow us at assembly.net and join us for our next podcast on the problem of logistics and excess capacity.